Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really going deep, exploring one of the oldest, most widespread spiritual phenomena humans have ever known, shamanism.
It really is foundational, isn't it? We're talking practices that might, and this is incredible, stretch back tens of thousands of years. Some people see hints of it even in Paleolithic cave paintings.
Wow. So our mission today is really to get past the sort of common stereotypes, tell the full story as much as we can, and maybe focus on the big mysteries, the things we still don't fully grasp about these technicians of the sacred, as Eliade called them.
That's the core of it.
Hmm.
And we have to start right there with the biggest puzzle, which is the term shamanism itself. It's tricky.
Where does it even come from?
It's originally a Siberian word from the Tungusic language, shaman, and basically means one who knows. Simple enough, right?
Okay.
One who knows. But how did it become this huge umbrella term? I know the academic definition, like from Mircea Eliade, talks about it not being a religion exactly. Right, more like a technique of religious ecstasy. That was his phrase. It's about a specific kind of practitioner.
Someone who deliberately goes into an altered state of consciousness, an ASC.
Exactly. Voluntarily enters that state to, well, interact with what they perceive as a spirit world, an unseen reality. And crucially, this isn't for show. It's practical. It's about serving the community.
Like healing, or finding lost things, or maybe negotiating with spirits for good weather or hunts.
Precisely. Healing, divination, keeping the balance between the human world and the wider spiritual environment. It's a service role.
But that's where the controversy starts, isn't it? Using this one word, shaman, from one Siberian culture to label practices from the Amazon, Africa, Australia, everywhere.
Huge controversy, and a really valid one. Scholars like Alice Keogh and many indigenous critics make a powerful argument that doing this is, well, frankly, a kind of colonial oversimplification.
It lumps everything together.
It risks erasing the incredible diversity, the unique cultural contexts, the specific meanings within each tradition. You can even argue it reinforces old, sometimes racist, tropes about primitive magic.
So it's this paradox. We have this category that seems analytically useful for seeing patterns across cultures.
Patterns like the three worlds, the initiation crisis.
Right. But using the category risks disrespecting and misunderstanding the very traditions it's trying to describe. So why do we kind of stick with it? Why not just say ecstatic practitioners or something more neutral?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's because, despite the problems, the term shamanism points to something genuinely recurrent, something deeply human. This pattern of entering altered states, journeying, healing through spirit interaction. It appears again and again independently.
So it highlights a fundamental human capacity.
Perhaps. But that capacity is always expressed through a very specific cultural lens. So you've got this constant tension. It's universal in structure, maybe, but intensely local and specific in its meaning and practice. That's the central mystery we have to keep in mind.
Okay, let's hold that tension and look at the figure at the center of it all, the shaman. When you break down what they actually do, it's like they were the original polymath, weren't they? Handling roles we've split up into dozens of modern jobs.
Absolutely. A pre-modern, all-in-one specialist is a good way to put it. And yeah, the rules are incredibly varied. But you're right, the absolute core universally seems to be healer.
But healing in a very specific way, right? Not about germs or physical injury in the first instance.
Exactly. Shamanic healing looks at the spiritual cause first. The idea is that physical illness or mental distress often stems from something being wrong on a spiritual level. The body is just showing the symptoms of a deeper imbalance.
And the sources talk about two main kinds of spiritual problems they address. One is soul loss. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, soul loss is a big one. The belief is that a part of your vital essence, your soul, can literally flee your body due to shock, trauma, abuse, intense fear. You name it.
And that loss makes you vulnerable.
It leads to symptoms like chronic depression, listlessness, apathy, a feeling of not being fully present, or persistent illness that just won't heal. The shaman's job is to find that lost piece and bring it back.
Okay, and the other main issue is intrusions.
Right, spiritual intrusions. These are seen as harmful energies or objects, sometimes conceptualized as darts or crystals, or just negative energy that have somehow lodged themselves in a person's spiritual or physical body. Maybe through sorcery, maybe just bad luck. The shaman needs to extract them.
So doctor and therapist, basically. But that's just the start, isn't it?
Oh yeah, they're also the diviner, the prophet, one who can see into the hidden dimensions.
So predicting the future. finding lost people or things, diagnosing the spiritual reason why the hunt failed or the rains didn't come.
Exactly. They're the community's early warning system. They're investigator of unseen causes. They provide crucial information that you just can't get through ordinary means.
And they talk to spirits, right, like negotiate.
Yeah, that's the mediator role. They act as an intermediary between the human community and the vast world of spirits. Ancestors, nature spirits, spirits of animals, weather spirits, you name it.
So if you need a successful hunt, you might need the shaman to go talk to the master of animal spirit.
Precisely. Or negotiate for rain, or ensure fertility, or resolve disputes that have a spiritual dimension. They maintain the relationship with the more than human world.
One role I find fascinating is the psychopomp, the guide of souls.
That's crucial. Guiding the souls of the dead to where they're supposed to go. Preventing them from getting lost and becoming, well, troubled ghosts that might linger and cause problems for the living. It's about maintaining the boundary between life and death properly.
And on top of all that, they're often the keepers of the sacred stories, the myths, the genealogies.
The custodian of lore, yeah. Living libraries of essential cultural knowledge. Often they're the ones who know how to run the major ceremonies too. So you see, the scope is immense. And that immense power, it makes them ambiguous figures.
How so? Ambiguous in what way?
Well, descriptions often paint them as different. Highly sensitive, maybe eccentric, intuitive, perhaps a bit volatile. People perceive them as having an innate connection to that other world.
Which makes them respected, obviously. They hold a lot of power and influence.
Immense respect, often advisors to chiefs or leaders, but also fear. That same power that lets them heal and mediate, it could theoretically be used for harm, for sorcery, for cursing.
So they're walking a tightrope, respected for their connection, feared for that same connection.
Exactly. Which brings us to this idea of liminality. They exist betwixt and between. They don't fit neatly into ordinary social categories.
Can we make that more concrete? What does liminal mean in practice for a shaman?
It can be literal. Sometimes they live physically apart from the main settlement. Or, symbolic, their clothing might mix male and female elements, defying gender norms. Cosmologically, they're the bridge. The only one who can consciously travel between the everyday world, the world of the gods or spirits above, and the world of the dead or primal forces below.
So their power actually comes from being on the threshold, from being this anomaly.
That seems to be the idea. Because they've symbolically died and come back, because they stand outside normal structures, they have the power to mediate between structures, between worlds, between life and death, sickness and health. They embody the transition zone. And that's why people feel both reverence and, well, a healthy dose of caution around them. Now, to really get what the shaman does, you have to understand the map they operate on, the shamanic cosmos. And what's fascinating is how consistent this basic map is across totally different cultures. It's usually a three-part structure.
It's a tripartite universe, right? Okay, what are the layers?
At the top, you've got the upper world. Think celestial realms, associated with light, wisdom, cosmic order, maybe high gods, or the most revered ancestors. That's where a shaman might journey for, let's say, profound guidance or prophecy.
Okay, the heavens. Then there's our world.
The middle world, yeah. Ordinary reality as we experience it day to day. But crucially, for the shaman, this middle world isn't inert matter. It's alive, it's interwoven with spirit. Animals, plants, rivers, mountains, they all have their own consciousness, their own agency.
That's the animism part.
Exactly. Animism is the worldview. Shamanism is the methodology for interacting within that living, spiritualized world. It's about communication and relationship with all these other beings.
Okay, upper world, middle world, and the lower world. Now, this is the one people often misunderstand, isn't it? Thinking it's like hell.
Totally misunderstood sometimes. It's usually depicted as underground, yes, maybe dark or challenging, but it's fundamentally a place of primal power, raw earth energy, instinct. It's not about punishment.
So what is it about? Why go there?
It's a place of profound healing and transformation. Shamans often journey to the lower world to retrieve those lost soul fragments we talked about, or to confront the deep instinctual sources of illness or power. It's where you might encounter powerful animal spirits, the raw stuff of creation. Think of it more like the deep subconscious, maybe, a place of immense potential, even if it feels dangerous.
In connecting all three, there's usually some kind of pathway.
Yes, the axis mundi, the world pillar, the connector. It's symbolized in different ways. The world tree is very common, with roots in the lower world and branches in the upper. Or it could be a sacred mountain, a cosmic river, even the smoke hole in the yurt or tent, acting as a symbolic entryway. It's the vertical path the shaman travels.
So the animistic view is fundamental. Everything is alive, has spirit. Shamanism is how you navigate and negotiate within that living cosmos.
Precisely. If there's a problem in the community illness, famine the shaman isn't just looking for a physical cause. They're asking which relationship is broken, which spirit needs to be appeased or consulted. It's about restoring balance within this web of connections.
And this brings us to maybe the deepest mystery here. The idea that this map of the cosmos isn't just out there, but it's also inside, a map of the mind.
That's the really mind-bending connection people are exploring now, because the shaman's journey isn't literal travel in a spaceship, right? It's an experiential journey undertaken in an altered state. So this three-world structure starts to look remarkably like a model of human consciousness.
How so? The upper world is like higher consciousness.
You can see it that way. The realm of transcendence, peak experiences, spiritual insight, maybe what psychology calls the superconscious.
And the lower world, you mentioned the subconscious.
Exactly. It maps incredibly well onto concepts from depth psychology, journeying down to face monsters or shadow figures, retrieving lost parts of the self. That sounds a lot like confronting your shadow aspects in Jungian terms, or integrating repressed material. Retrieving soul fragments is practically a metaphor for trauma recovery.
Wow. So the shamanic cosmos isn't just a quaint belief system. It could be an incredibly ancient, sophisticated technology for psychological exploration and integration.
That's the argument. That the spirits, the landscapes, the journeys, these are the culturally specific ways humans have learned to navigate and interact with the deepest structures of their own psyche, accessed through these altered states. The outer map mirrors the inner map.
Okay, if it involves such deep psychological territory, it makes sense that becoming a shaman isn't usually like, signing up for a course. It sounds more like something that happens to you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The sources are clear. It's almost always involuntary. It's a spiritual summons. It's not a career choice. It's a destiny, often one that's resisted quite strongly at first.
How does it typically start?
The most dramatic way is what's called spontaneous vocation. Usually happens in youth, adolescence, or early adulthood. The person might suddenly start having intense visions, fall into unexplained illnesses, suffer extreme mental anguish. Basically, they're tormented by the spirits.
Tormented until they accept the call.
Pretty much. They might try to run from it, refuse it, but the suffering, physical or mental, only stops when they finally surrender and agree to take on the role. Sometimes it's triggered by a near-death experience, a serious illness, or being struck by lightning, something that shatters their ordinary reality.
Sounds terrifying. Western culture might just call that a psychotic break.
And that's a key difference in perspective. In these traditional contexts, this period of intense crisis, the initiatory crisis or a shamanic illness, isn't seen as mere pathology to be suppressed. It's understood as the beginning of their transformation. Their soul is considered to be abducted, taken away by the spirits for training.
And they have to heal themselves through that experience.
Exactly. They gain their knowledge and power by navigating their own harrowing journey through the spirit world, through their own sickness. They have to learn to heal themselves first. That's the essence of the wounded healer archetype. Their authority comes from having been broken and finding the way back.
And the peak of this crisis. This is where it gets really intense, right? The symbolic death and rebirth.
This is perhaps the most profound and frankly terrifying part. It's not just a metaphor. In deep trance, visions, or dreams, the initiate has a vivid, felt experience of being killed and taken apart by spirits.
Dismembered, like literally.
Symbolically, yes, but experienced as utterly real. Accounts, especially from Siberia and the Arctic, are incredibly consistent. They describe feeling their flesh stripped off, their bones cleaned and counted, their organs removed, examined, sometimes replaced with magical objects like crystals.
Wow, that's a complete overhaul.
It's the ultimate ontological transformation. The old, profane self is annihilated. When the spirits reassemble the body, often with the help of ancestors or spirit guides, the person who wakes up is fundamentally a new being. They've died to the ordinary world and been reborn as someone who can bridge realities.
That experience alone must confer incredible authority.
It does. It's the bedrock of their power and the source of their spirit allies. But even after that, it's not over. Then comes the practical learning, the rigors of apprenticeship.
So surviving the spirit world isn't enough. You need human teachers too.
Definitely. Years, sometimes decades, of training with an elder shaman. It's a dual training. You continue learning directly from your spirits in trance. That's the ecstatic part. But you also learn the traditions from your human mentor. The myths, the specific rituals, the secret language shamans sometimes use. how to interpret signs, how to handle specific ailments, how to see properly.
So it's not just about having visions, it's about integrating them and learning the craft.
Exactly. And this is the crucial difference from, say, just reading a book or taking a workshop. The entire process, from the initial illness to the long apprenticeship, is about becoming a fundamentally different kind of person. A hollow bone, as some traditions say, a clear channel for spirit. It's an ontological shift, not just skill acquisition.
Okay, let's shift to the actual techniques. How do they do it? How do they get into these states and perform healings? We're starting to understand this now, not just as belief, but as, well, applied science almost.
That's a great way to frame it. Shamanism as applied neurology. The absolute core skill is mastering the altered state of consciousness, achieving ecstasy or trance voluntarily.
How do they manage that? It's not always drugs, is it?
No, not at all. Non-pharmacological methods are incredibly common, probably more so globally. Things like intense fasting, sleep deprivation, isolation, enduring physical ordeals. Think of the Sundance piercings, or hours of ecstatic dancing until collapse, pushing the body and mind to their limits.
But the most famous tool is the drum, right?
The drum is iconic for a reason. It's often called the shaman's horse or canoe or steed, the vehicle for soul flight. And it's not just symbolic. The sound itself is a technology.
Sonic driving.
Precisely. It's about the rhythm. Specifically, a relentless, monotonous beat usually maintains somewhere between 3 and 7 beats per second. That specific frequency range is key
Why that range?
because it directly affects brainwaves. Our normal waking consciousness is dominated by beta waves. That steady, driving rhythm helps shift the brain into the theta state.
And theta is different.
Very different. Theta is the state associated with deep meditation, hypnosis, dreaming, the moments just before sleep. It's a state where visionary experiences, access to subconscious material, and profound relaxation are much more likely. The shaman is literally using sound to tune their brain to a different frequency, opening the doors to the inner worlds.
Fascinating. But sometimes they do use psychoactive substances, right?
Oh yes, particularly in the Americas. These are entheogens, substances believed to generate the divine within. Things like ayahuasca, the vine brew from the Amazon, peyote cactus used by native North Americans, psilocybin mushrooms in Mesoamerica and elsewhere.
But again, the context is vital here. This isn't casual tripping.
Absolutely not. It's
Sorry.
sacred medicine used within a highly structured ritual context, guided by an experienced practitioner, usually for specific purposes like healing or divination. The plant itself is often considered a powerful spirit teacher.
So using these tools, the drum, the plants, the ordeal, they enter the state and then they do the healing work. We talked about soul retrieval.
Right. The shaman journeys, often to the lower world, finds that lost fragment of the patient's soul, which might appear as a younger version of the person, or an animal, or just light convinces it to return.
And then what? How do they get it back in?
The ritual action is often very physical. They might capture the soul essence in their hands, or in a crystal, carry it back, and then literally blow or place it back into the patient's body, often at the crown of the head or the chest, sealing the return. It's about restoring that vital energy.
And the other method, extraction healing.
That's for removing those harmful intrusions we mentioned. The shaman uses their altered state vision to locate the intrusive energy or object within the patient's body. Then, through various ritual means, often involving sucking on the affected area, sometimes using hands, feathers, or crystals, they draw out the intrusion and safely dispose of it.
So when you put it all together, the altered states, the specific techniques, it really does look like a system for working with the mind and body in ways we're only beginning to appreciate scientifically.
Exactly. That's the applied neurology perspective again. These ancient rituals are incredibly sophisticated ways of knowing and interacting with the world, achieved by deliberately altering brain function. Neuroepistemology, you could call it.
And modern science is actually backing this up.
Increasingly, yes. Take ayahuasca, for example. Brain imaging studies show that it significantly decreases activity in the brain's default mode network, the DMN.
Remind us what the DMN does.
It's kind of the brain's me network. It's active when we're mind-wandering, thinking about ourselves, our past, our future. It maintains our sense of being a stable, separate ego.
So quieting the DMN, what does that do?
It correlates strongly with experiences of ego dissolution, feelings of unity, interconnectedness with nature, or the cosmos experiences often reported during shamanic journeys or mystical states. So the soul flight, the encounters with spirit guides. These might be understood as the culturally shaped interpretations of profound neurocognitive shifts that occur when the ordinary ego structure temporarily recedes.
It suggests they weren't just making things up. They stumbled upon, or were perhaps taught by the plants themselves, how to access fundamentally different modes of consciousness.
It certainly elevates shamanism from primitive superstition to something like an incredibly advanced pre-scientific system for exploring the potentials of the human nervous system.
Now, to actually do this work, shamans don't just rely on altered states. They use tools, clothing. The materiality of spirit seems really important. Their gear isn't just symbolic, is it?
Not at all. The shaman's regalia, their special clothing and adornments, are active tools. They're containers and conductors of power, aids to transformation.
Like incorporating parts of animals, feathers, claws, antlers.
Exactly. That's about drawing on the power, the essence of that animal spirit. Sometimes it's believed to help the shaman become that animal during their spirit journey, borrowing its abilities, flight, sight, strength.
You mentioned something incredibly specific earlier about Siberian shamans and skeletons.
Yes, the skeletal motifs. It's remarkable. On their coats, you'll often find representations of a human skeleton, sewn or attached ribs, spine, limbs, sometimes a metal disc for the heart.
Why? What does that signify?
It's a public declaration. It says, I have been taken apart, I have been to the land of the dead where only bones remain, and I have been reassembled and returned. It's the visible mark of their initiation, their mastery over death. They literally wear their transformation.
That's powerful. And you said some coats even have metal bits like wings.
Yeah, among groups like the Saka or Yakut, small pieces of iron or other metal representing the bones of a bird are attached. When the shaman dances and enters trance, these pieces clang and shimmer, symbolically turning the coat into wings, aiding the sensation and efficacy of flight along the axis mundi.
Amazing. And the instruments. We talked about the drum's rhythm, but its physical form matters too.
Immensely. The drum is often considered the most vital tool. And in some traditions, like the Sami of Scandinavia, the drum's membrane isn't just stretched hide, it's a cosmological map.
They draw the universe on it.
Yes, painted with symbols representing the three worlds, the world tree, key spirits, maybe even important locations in the local landscape. So the drum is simultaneously the vehicle for the journey, through sound, and the map of the journey, practical and symbolic, rolled into one.
What about rattles? They seem common too.
The rattle serves a different sonic function. Its sharp, percussive sound is often used to call in spirits, define sacred space, or break up stagnant energy. It provides a different texture to the trance state compared to the drum's drone.
And masks. Shamanic masks can be incredible pieces of art, but they're more than that, right?
Oh, absolutely. The shamanic mask is a powerful piece of spiritual technology. It does a couple of key things. Firstly, it helps dissolve the shaman's ordinary identity. By hiding their human face, it makes it easier to step aside and become a vessel for a spirit.
So ego dissolution again.
Exactly. And secondly, it allows a spirit, maybe an ancestor, a nature deity, a mythological figure, to manifest visually and audibly. The spirit can literally speak and act through the masked shaman, making the unseen visible and tangible for the community.
Plus other things like feathers for clearing energy, crystals for focusing power or healing, sacred herbs like sage or tobacco for purification.
Right. All these material objects aren't just props. They bridge the symbolic and the somatic. There are technologies that work on both the spiritual imagination and, quite possibly, the nervous system itself, helping to facilitate the shaman's work. The fact that this core complex of the three worlds, the initiatory crisis, soul flight, specific tools, appears in so many disconnected parts of the world really points to its incredible antiquity. We might be looking at something that goes back to the very dawn of human symbolic culture.
You mentioned the Paleolithic cave art earlier. Can we return to that? What's the evidence there?
It's interpretative, of course, but compelling. In caves like Lascaux or Trois Frères in France, you find these amazing figures called therianthropes, beings that are part human, part animal. The famous sorcerer of Trois Frères, for instance, has human legs, antlers, owl eyes, bear paws.
And the thinking is these represent shamans mid-transformation, or maybe they're spirit helpers.
That's a major interpretation, yes. Figures caught between worlds, embodying that connection. And there's more. Surrounding these figures, and sometimes alone, you find geometric patterns. Dots, grids, zigzags, spirals.
What are those thought to be?
Entoptic phenomena. These are patterns believed to be generated by the human nervous system itself under certain conditions. Deep trance, sensory deprivation, migraine auras, or the influence of psychoactive substances.
So the artists might have been painting what they were literally seeing during altered states, induced deliberately.
That's the implication. It suggests that not only were altered states being experienced tens of thousands of years ago, but they were culturally important enough to be recorded in the most sacred spaces. It pushes the origin of these practices way, way back.
Okay, so it's ancient and widespread. But it's not monolithic. You mentioned a great divide in how shamanism manifests globally.
Yeah, it's a useful, if maybe slightly simplified way to think about the main variations. Broadly, you see a split between soul flight traditions and spirit possession traditions.
Soul flight is the classic model we've mostly been discussing, like in Siberia.
Right. The shaman's own soul travels out of body. They are the active agent, journeying to other worlds, commanding or negotiating with spirits. They generally remain conscious and in control, even in deep trance. This tends to be found more often in smaller scale, often hunter-gatherer, societies where individual mastery and autonomy might be highly valued.
Okay, and spirit possession is different how?
In possession traditions, which are very common in parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, and places like Korea, the dynamic is reversed. The spirit, often an ancestor, a deity, or a powerful nature spirit, comes into the practitioner.
So the shaman becomes a vessel.
Exactly. They might go into a trance, and their body is essentially ridden by the spirit, which then speaks and acts through them. Often the shaman themselves has little or no memory of what happened during the possession state.
Why the difference? Does it relate to the type of society?
There seems to be a correlation. Possession is often found in more complex, hierarchical societies, and it can serve an interesting social function. It often provides a legitimate platform and source of authority for individuals, frequently women or people from lower status groups, who might otherwise lack power in the social structure. When the god speaks through them, people have to listen, regardless of the vessel's ordinary status.
That's fascinating. Can you give an example? You mentioned Korea.
Korea's Nuseok is a great example because it actually has both types. You have the Sesupmu, who are often hereditary shamans, primarily focused on performing rituals and mediating. Then you have the Kangsinmu, who are initiated, often through that intense spirit sickness, and become possessed by the gods, the Shin, during dramatic ceremonies called Kut, allowing direct communication.
So the environment shapes the practice. Like in the Amazon, the focus is on plants and maybe jaguar spirits.
Absolutely. The local ecology, the cosmology, the social structure, they all influence how that fundamental shamanic impulse manifests. In the Amazon, intimate knowledge of thousands of plants is key. In the Arctic, it's about negotiating with the powerful spirits of the ice, the sea mammals, the masters of the animals essential for survival. The technology adapts to the need and the place.
Which brings us right up to today. How is this ancient community-focused tradition adapting or surviving in our very modern, globalized, individualistic world? This seems like the latest and maybe most complex mystery.
It's definitely complex and often contentious. The main way it's manifesting in the West is through neo-shamanism.
What exactly is that?
It generally refers to adaptations of shamanic techniques, often stripped from their original cultural contexts, and applied for modern Western audiences. Michael Harner's core shamanism is probably the best-known example.
His idea was to find the universal techniques, right?
Yeah.
Like the drumming journey.
Exactly. To distill what he saw as the cross-cultural essence of shamanic practice, making it accessible to anyone, anywhere, without needing to belong to a specific indigenous culture.
But that immediately raises flags, doesn't it? The whole context stripping thing.
Huge flags. And it points to a fundamental shift. Traditional shamanism is almost always about community service. Healing others, ensuring collective well-being, maintaining cosmic balance. Neo-shamanism much more often focuses on individual growth, personal healing, self-discovery, kind of psychotherapeutic goals.
And the path is different, too. No traumatic initiation, usually.
Right. Instead of a lifelong, often involuntary and dangerous calling rooted in a specific lineage and landscape, you have voluntary workshops, paid retreats, weekend courses. This leads directly into the thorny issue of commodification of spirit.
Like shamanic tourism, people flying to the Amazon for ayahuasca ceremonies.
That's a prime example. On one hand, it can bring income to indigenous communities. On the other hand, the demand from relatively wealthy foreigners puts immense pressure on local healers. They might feel pushed to offer ceremonies more frequently, perhaps train apprentices too quickly, maybe even alter rituals to suit Western expectations, potentially shifting their focus away from their own community's needs.
And it risks turning something sacred into a product.
That's the core fear. Sacred practices, ancient knowledge, plant medicines being packaged and sold like any other consumer experience, which fuels the really heated debate around cultural appropriation.
The plastic shaman critique.
Exactly. From many indigenous perspectives, non-natives taking up these practices, especially for profit or without deep long-term commitment and accountability to the source culture, isn't just disrespectful. It's seen as a continuation of colonial exploitation, taking valuable cultural resources after so much else has already been taken or destroyed.
Especially when these traditions were often suppressed, even outlawed by colonial powers.
Precisely. For many communities, these spiritual traditions are inextricably linked to their identity, their resistance, their survival. To see them adopted casually or misrepresented or used for profit by outsiders can feel like a deep violation, a trivialization of something sacred earned through generations of struggle.
But what's the counter-argument? The defense of something like core shamanism?
The main defense is the universal birthright argument. Proponents say that shamanic consciousness, the ability to enter altered states and connect with spirit, is an innate human capacity, a potential buried in everyone's ancestral heritage, regardless of their current culture.
So core shamanism isn't stealing from one specific culture, it's just reviving universal techniques.
That's the claim, that these fundamental techniques like drumming, journeying, belong to humanity as a whole, not exclusively to any single group alive today.
It's a really difficult tension, isn't it? Both sides seem to have a point.
They really do. The sheer global distribution and ancient roots strongly suggest a universal human potential. But the fact remains that these practices survived because they were carefully stewarded within specific living cultures, often under duress. How do you honor the universal potential without disrespecting the specific cultural vessel that carried it? That's the unresolved conflict tangled up in history, power, and the ethics of sharing sacred knowledge in a globalized world.
So tracing this path from possible Paleolithic origins right up to these modern controversies, what stands out is the sheer resilience of the shamanic archetype, isn't it? The figure who mediates between worlds, the master of altered states. It keeps reappearing.
It really does, whether they're negotiating with animal spirits for a hunt or guiding a modern individual through psychological integration, the core function of restoring balance, of connecting the seen and unseen, persists.
And we're starting to understand the how. The neuroscience is catching up, validating the techniques, the sonic driving, the effects of entheogens on the brain, the reality of altered states as distinct modes of cognition.
We are making progress on the mechanisms, yes. We can talk about theta waves and the default mode network, but the meaning systems, the animistic worldview where everything is alive, the felt reality of spirit helpers, the experiential truth of the three worlds, that still presents a profound challenge to our dominant materialistic paradigm.
Which leaves us with maybe the biggest mystery of all. If these ancient cultures developed such sophisticated technologies for altering consciousness and mapping the psyche, technologies rooted in a worldview of profound interconnectedness and ecological balance,
Then perhaps the ultimate question isn't just how the shaman journeys, or even whether the spirits are real in an objective sense. Maybe the real mystery is what it tells us about ourselves, that we evolved this capacity to experience reality as fundamentally more than meets the eye.
and what we might be losing individually and collectively by largely ignoring that capacity today, especially when facing crises that seem rooted in disconnection, ecological, social, spiritual.
If the shaman's cosmos is, in some way, a map of our own deepest potential for connection, maybe we need to learn how to read that map again.
Definitely something profound to think about.